Next on KQED Newsroom, transporting crude oil by rail is sparking safety concerns throughout the Bay Area. And efforts to pull the welcome mat from the rental service Airbnb. Plus, a one-on-one with Governor Jerry Brown.
I'm John Myers in Sacramento. This historic governor's mansion has a lot of California history inside it, and no one knows that better than Jerry Brown. We sat down with the governor here for a conversation about California politics and why he wants an unprecedented fourth term as governor.
Good evening and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Multiple proposals to transport crude oil on railroads in the Bay Area are fueling worries about health and safety. Just this week, a train carrying crude oil derailed in Virginia, sparking a fire and forcing hundreds to be evacuated. In 2013, 1.3 million gallons of oil were spilled in train accidents nationally, more than the combined total of every year since 1975. Locally, many officials and residents are opposing plans to increase crude oil rail shipments. A proposed storage and transfer facility in the East Bay city of Pittsburg has raised further controversy. How much of a danger does crude by rail pose, and are there any alternatives? Joining me now for a look at the issue are Tom Vacar, consumer editor with KTVU, Yvonne Addassi with the California Office of Spill Prevention and Response, and Molly Samuel with KQED Science. Molly, how many crude by rail projects are being proposed for the Bay Area, and why is there so much concern?
Well, there are two on the table in the Bay Area. There's the Pittsburg one you mentioned, that's the Westpac oil terminal, which would be bringing in crude by rail, by ship, and by pipeline. And there's another in Benicia. The Valero refinery wants to build its own rail terminal. Meanwhile, Kinder Morgan in Richmond is already bringing in crude by rail. The concerns with this come down to safety, the accidents that you've mentioned, and this isn't just in the cities where these terminals are, but going all the way back up the track to where the oil comes from.
And why is there so much more oil being transported now, Tom?
Well, because of fracking especially, there's this new supply of oil in the United States, which has a ready market in the United States, in Canada, and even overseas. And there's so much of it available. The trouble is where it's coming from is not rich in pipelines the way that the coasts are and various parts of the South are. So as a result, if you're going to sell this oil, you have to transport it. And since it costs billions of dollars and sometimes years, if not decades, to build a pipeline, what do? You figure out what the alternative is. Trains are a very good alternative. One of those cars holds 30,000 gallons of crude oil. That's a lot of oil. You put 100 cars together, and suddenly you've got something that is the equivalent of a pipeline on wheels. And if you have enough shipments of that, let me just tell you how much we're talking about. In 2008, 9,500 carloads went by rail. In 2012, it was almost 250,000. That was in 2012.
Wow.
Last year, it went from 2012 to 400,000. There's a big, big business there.
What types of laws currently exist for how the oil is transported?
So I think there's a couple of ways to look at that. One is the laws that govern the railroads, which is done mostly at the federal level by the Federal Railroad Administration. There's a lot of federal preemption for the states. The California Public Utilities Commission does have authority to implement some of those, and I'm sorry, the acronyms, the Railroad Administration's laws, okay? There are requirements for tank standards. There are requirements for the cars that they use. There's requirements for inspection of the rails themselves. One of the things that we would like to see at the Office of Spill Prevention and Response is to see our ability to regulate the movement of oil throughout the state, not just in the marine zone where we've done it since '91, but statewide, and deal with the risks that come from rail or from pipeline or from all of those areas. Because as you said, you can move the oil however you're going to move it, but every way that you move it within the state is going to create its own risks, its own cost benefits, right?
Well, right now, are state and local governments told ahead of time which routes these trains are going to take and what kinds of crude oil they're carrying.
Well, every chemical car that carries anything has a placard on it, and if you go to your little Google and you put in the hazmat number, which is in that diamond-shaped thing, you will find out that there's a lot of nasty stuff out there.
But you have to see the train cars go by. Or is there any advance notice to the cities that this is coming through your town?
Well, I don't know if there's advance notice to the cities. There's advance notice the railroad would probably have to tell you if there's something unusually dangerous, but a lot of this stuff is just it's, you know, business as usual. And while they are aware that this is going on, the reality of the situation is that along the, let's say, the corridor up by Pittsburg, what they're upset about is many houses were built up there. In the 50s and 60s, big industry. The industry kind of went away because a lot of that went overseas. So these cities wanted to become bedroom communities, and indeed they did. They built houses right up next to the old PG&E power plant, which has this big tank farm there. Well, a lot of these people were under the impression and told by some salespeople that no, they're going to tear those tanks down. Some of these people are within a couple of 100 feet of these tanks, and if one of those were to explode or to have some sort of a leak, they would be very much at risk. There
is no buffer zone, unlike Dow, which is in Contra Costa County, which has been around since the 1930s. There is a 1-mile buffer zone around Dow. The oil we're talking about, there are two different kinds, right, Molly?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of what's being transported by rail is either from Alberta, it's the tar sands, and that's what environmentalists refer to as dirty oil. It's thick, it takes a lot of energy to get it out of the ground, and that's the concern there is really, you know, it's a climate change concern, it's an environmental concern. The Bakken crude from North Dakota, it's lighter, it's sweeter, but it also seems to be, it's more volatile. And this is the stuff that's been exploding in these fiery crashes. And so depending on what your major concern is, I mean, it's sort of, either one is maybe not great, but it's two different issues that you're looking at with the different crudes.
And let's just add one other fact, which I think is important for people to understand. Even the rail industry says there are 92,000 of these cars, older cars. You just don't buy one for 2 years and you stay around for many years. 92,000 need to either be upgraded or gotten rid of. Well, that's a lot of money we're talking about, and the people are going to have to pay that freight, are going to have to pay that money, and ultimately the consumer's going to have to pay that money. When you're talking about 92,000 cars, you're talking about a ton of money.
But in fact, Canada is already making some movement in that realm, because they recently aggressively pushed for the phasing out of the cars that he talked about, the DOT 111s.
Correct.
To phase them out completely. Right,
and to replace them with the more upgraded model of that tank car. And discussions are going on at the federal level as well to take a look at the very same types of things. There's some voluntary agreements right now with the railroads, but I also think that, and I'm sorry, I'm back to acronyms again. I also think that the FRA and the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Administration, we call it PHMSA, is also taking a look at, well, what is reasonable? Especially as you said, we're looking at oil. I mean, they've been transporting oil by rail for a very long time. This is nothing new. What we are seeing new with this oil that we've not seen before are the fires. That somehow when it's derailed, you know, it's very volatile. The gas escapes. It's very easy for that gas to find an ignition source. I mean, steel is hitting steel, right? And so you're seeing a lot of these heat-induced tears. Vapors come out and it catches fire. So the fire is what we see is different. And I know you and I talked about this earlier, but we're also seeing that the cause of these accidents are all different. The most recent one had to do with the erosion of the side of where the track was. In Lac Medantic, it was they didn't apply brakes the way that they were supposed to on the short line. I mean, one was a collapse of a trestle. So, and there's also human factors as well. So I think the question is, if they're going to start transporting this, how do we do it in a more safe way? And what are the public right to know for the local governments as well?
And the oil industry, Tom, excuse me, the oil industry makes some arguments here. Do they have a point when they say that isn't it better to have oil from domestic sources than from overseas? They claim this is safe, it creates jobs, it provides additional revenue for cities. Do they have a point?
Well, they have that point, and every once in a while they punctuate that with like the fire that we had out in Richmond, and people go, wait a minute, this sounds a little too good to be true. I'll give you an example of one of the arguments that they're going to have. There's a thing in the shipping of oil and other flammable liquids called spill rate. Pipelines, the industry argues, has 6.3 gallons per ton mile. That's the thing. But that is as opposed to 2.2 gallons per ton mile on rail cars. So the rail industry will argue we're much safer than a pipeline. Well, maybe you are and maybe you aren't. It all depends on where your pipeline breaks, and it certainly depends on where your train crashes. If it crashes in the middle of a town, as it did in Canada, it killed 47 people. If it happened in Lynchburg, didn't kill anybody, but there was a big fire, and hundreds of people are evacuated. So these numbers are nice to toss around, but the thing that concerns the people that I talk to in Pittsburgh and other places along the line, and people in Berkeley are concerned about this, is, wait a minute. We don't want to have this unless it is absolutely necessary, unless it's absolutely safe, and nobody can guarantee that.
Okay, and there is some movement on this because we know there are a couple of pending pieces of legislation in California to regulate this, and also Transportation Secretary Anthony Foxx is preparing to send out some options on safety to the White House, and that's hopefully coming out by the end of this year. But I want to thank you all for being here for a very insightful conversation. Molly Samuel, Tom Vacar, and Yvonne Addassi. Thank you both, all of you. And coming up, why do some Bay Area city officials want to take the air out of Airbnb? But first, Governor Jerry Brown is weeks away from what is likely the final campaign of a political career that spans nearly half a century. Brown is seeking a record fourth term 40 years after winning his first race as governor. The iconic Democrat is embracing something he famously rejected in the 1970s, tradition and the long view of California. KQED senior political editor John Myers caught up with Brown at the historic Governor's Mansion in Sacramento.
It is part of California's rich political history, the house that served for more than 6 decades as a governor's mansion. To the public, it's a museum. To Jerry Brown, it was a home, although a home not every governor who lived here appreciated.
I think some of the governors from Southern California are used to ranch houses, one story. This is a Victorian house, and they're very common in San Francisco and even in Oakland.
Brown was 20 years old and in seminary school when his father, the late Pat Brown, took office and moved the family into the Sacramento mansion. In the last few years, though, Jerry Brown has been quietly bringing this place back to life, from private dinners with legislators to even inviting in distant relatives to help celebrate his 76th birthday.
I have literally, not dozens, but hundreds of relatively near-term cousins in California and even in neighboring states. So I try to capture that history in my own mind. I find a certain strength, orientation, and clarity by thinking about where we came from.
Where Jerry Brown came from is in some ways far different than where he is now.
And I'm available to people, and I haven't seen too many good suggestions come my way.
Because in cutting government, in reducing government...
You don't help poor people when you cut government. You don't hurt them. The fact is the people in government are people who've gotten through the system and are collecting a paycheck, oftentimes for purporting to help poor people, but they're just helping themselves.
His first go-around as governor in the 70s was that of a politician in a hurry, with presidential ambitions and no time or interest in the traditions of the past. Now, Brown's pace of governing is slower, and he seems more interested in leaving something behind.
Well, it changes because we are changed, and the world is changing. Those pillars that I certainly endeavored to pull down to some degree have already fallen down, and now I feel the need that we got to build them up and to create structures and foundations on which we can build this ever-changing, complex, diverse world.
Building and planning are what cemented his father's place in the history books. Pat Brown led epic endeavors to push California into the future. Schools, roads, a water aqueduct system from north to south. Jerry Brown has his own historic battles to fight: a drought, a controversial Delta Tunnels project, and trying to keep the state's plans for a high-speed rail system on track. What do you think your father would think today about the work you're doing, about the state?
Well, he certainly had a sense of California's past and tradition, and he liked to build things. So whether it was water or freeways or high-speed rail, I'm sure he would be very excited to see California still on the move.
But critics say California, in so many other ways, is stuck. Just this past week, Toyota announced a major exodus of jobs from Southern California. Unemployment remains the 4th highest in the nation, and Brown has been criticized for not doing enough to help close the gap between rich and poor. One place that's been talked about a lot is in the Bay Area and in San Francisco, and these protests against the tech companies and the Google buses. What do you make of all of that? I mean, do those protesters have a point?
They have a point because inequality, the return on assets is better than the return on labor and people's ability to make salaries. But it also is part of the economy and part of the prosperity and part of the tax system. So it's a matter of taking reasonable steps, and I think we're doing that. We have raised the minimum wage. We're giving driver's licenses to undocumented people. That certainly is going to help. We have the local funding formula, which directs significant billions of dollars to schools to help them cope with low-income families, with non-English speaking families, with foster care kids. But to try to close the gap, one little state can't do that.
Still, Jerry Brown does believe one state can lead the way on things like climate change. He's not only pushed hard to implement the landmark law signed by his predecessor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's also pushed for more reliance on electric cars and renewable energy.
Watch out, I'm going to start it.
But activists believe Jerry Brown contradicts his pro-environment stance on the issue of fracking, the process of using high-pressure water to loosen underground oil deposits. Last year, he signed a law to study its effects, but in the interim, allow fracking to continue. They believe that you're in denial about the dangers of fracking. I mean, they want a moratorium.
Some form, yeah, I understand that. And some cities want a moratorium on oil drilling and production in California. And yet, I haven't heard a moratorium on driving. Californians own 32 million vehicles, and they travel in 1 year over 330 billion miles, and most of that is fed by petroleum. So if it doesn't come out of the ground in California, it's got to come on a boat or it's got to come on a train. And that causes pollution, it has dangers, so we need a balance.
Balance, in Jerry Brown's view, seems to be a shorthand slogan for the campaign ahead. More work on the realignment of felons from prisons to local punishment, and more work on his plan to send education dollars to low-income communities, and more focus on California's legacy, and perhaps his own.
You know, I think this is still something I'm thinking a lot about. There's a word that people love, they love change. Well, I can tell you when you're 76, you're not as excited about change as when you're 26. But now I know everybody wants change, but we also like continuity. Tradition does have a value. What is California? Just the idea of the gold rush. What brought people here is still bringing people here. The Google and internet and Apple and California is still kind of a gold rush. So I think it's good to view the present through the lens of the past, but open to this incredible future that the state still very much possesses, and I feel very blessed to be a part of.
Well, on now to the online rental service Airbnb. It has exploded with more than 500,000 rooms and homes listed around the world. The San Francisco-based company offers short-term rentals, connecting so-called hosts to travelers and others. But in tight housing markets, it can also be controversial. Local officials, landlords, and tenants are grappling with how to regulate the industry. Scott Schaefer spoke with San Francisco Chronicle reporter Carolyn Said earlier about why tensions are growing.
Carolyn Said, welcome.
Thanks.
This Airbnb issue has really stirred up a hornet's nest. What is it about this issue that has just sort of touched a chord with so many different kinds of people?
Well, as you say, there are many, many different groups that are affected by Airbnb. I think, first of all, with the issue, it's not a new idea for people to rent out rooms in their homes or sublet their place when they're out of town. What Airbnb has brought is tremendous reach and scope through technology, so that there are maybe 6,000 rooms and homes in San Francisco alone available on the website and over 500,000 worldwide. So we have groups that rarely, if ever, find common ground in San Francisco that have united in opposition to Airbnb. We have landlords who don't want their tenants to sublet and worry about security and wear and tear on their apartments. We have tenants' rights activists who worry that scarce rental housing will be diverted and turned into more lucrative short-term hotels. We have some union activists who worry that hotel jobs will start to be eroded. And then we also have some neighbors and neighborhood groups who worry about sort of the quality of life issues.
So that can be a powerful coalition.
That is a powerful coalition. But on the other side, we have these thousands of people who are actually renting out places on Airbnb who say they are just regular people making ends meet, that it's been a nice way to make some extra income and meet people. And Airbnb itself, which is now a $10 billion company, which comes out with a lot of reports saying that its visitors, generate good economic benefits to the cities that they come to.
So there are two proposals now that are floating around. One is a ballot measure that's being pushed by three sort of well-known people, Doug Engman, Calvin Welch, Dale Carlson, who've been involved in politics and housing and planning in the city. Then you got legislation making its way through the Board of Supervisors. David Chu, the supervisor, is carrying that. What's the difference between those two proposals, and are they both trying to more or less accomplish the same thing?
No, they're actually very diametrically opposite. On the surface, they have some similarities, but whereas David Chu's legislation would legalize and create a framework for Airbnb listings to continue, the proposed ballot initiative would basically make them almost impossible to operate, so that it would just be reduced to a small handful. Both do create a system for a registry that anybody who wanted to rent out on Airbnb would need to register with the city. The Chu legislation would make that somewhat private. The information would only be available under a Public Records Act request. The ballot initiative would make it totally public. Both would call for Airbnb to start collecting and remitting the city's 14% hotel tax, which the company has said it will start doing this summer. 2 years, I might note, after the San Francisco treasurer said that it should do so.
Yeah, so they're kind of dragging their feet.
But there are a number of places they diverge. One of the big, most striking things about the ballot initiative is that it actually creates a bounty hunter system where if anybody could report somebody for doing Airbnb, and if back taxes and fines resulted, they would get 30% of that money. And that stirred a lot of outrage.
I'm sure it would. Yeah, it's kind of a snitch incentive there. So what would happen if the city just started enforcing laws? Because there already are laws on the books that say you can't do short-term 30 days or less rentals without some kind of a special permit. So why not just enforce the law?
Well, the city is lightly enforcing it. The planning department will respond to complaints. They have maybe 80 cases in process now. It's not that easy for them to find the places. Even if they're on Airbnb, people don't put up their exact addresses, and sometimes they try to hide themselves by, marking a pin in the middle of the Pacific Ocean rather than on the actual street they're on. They put up pictures of themselves now that don't really show them as well. So, and the city just doesn't have the person power to go around just 6,000 listings.
Yeah. Now, I know the Attorney General in New York State is also really clamping down on Airbnb. The hotels in New York City are furious about this. What about other cities in California? I mean, there are listings throughout the state, right? It's not just a San Francisco issue.
Well, in many ways, it is most heavily an issue in San Francisco and New York, because these are the two cities with very scarce supply of housing, rental housing, and very rapidly rising prices. And both cities are basically cities of renters. Both these cities are about 2/3 renters and 1/3 homeowners, whereas most cities are the inverse. It's not as controversial in sort of tourist towns where people maybe have second homes already that already were being rented out. There are other neighborhoods in, for example, West Hollywood in LA, like smaller neighborhoods that have been organizing and pushing back against it. But these two cities are the most organized in their opposition to Airbnb.
And then just quickly, what comes next? Is there some kind of a hearing that's going to be planned?
The Chu legislation will move forward with public hearings by the Planning Commission. The ballot initiative, we don't know if it'll happen. It needs to raise a lot of money.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
All right. Carolyn Said from the Chronicle, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And joining me now for a look at other stories we're watching is Scott Schaefer. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Twee.
This week, the U.S. Department of Education and the Obama administration released a list of 55 colleges and universities they're investigating for the handling of sexual assaults on their campuses. And there are some California colleges on that list. Which ones?
That's right, 4 of them right here in the Bay Area. UC Berkeley, down in Los Angeles, Occidental, where President Obama actually attended for a couple of years, USC, and then a small community college district north of Sacramento. And what they're actually investigating is looking whether or not there's a violation of Title 9, which prevents discrimination on the basis of sex for schools that get public funding. And so that's kind of the lever that they have to launch this investigation.
And it's a huge issue. The White House is saying that 1 in 5 female students at colleges and universities is sexually assaulted. What is the Education Department saying they'll do?
They're not really releasing a lot of details about the investigation itself. I think clearly they're hoping to send a very strong message that we can't have business as usual on these campuses. They want the universities to take these complaints very seriously and not kind of brush them away. And of course, there's an echo, too, of the military, where sexual assaults in the military really has been a big issue as well, and a lot of criticism there from people like Jackie Speer, the congresswoman from the Bay Area.
This is an election year. Are there political implications to this?
Always. Of course, women are very generally supportive of Democrats. They also tend not to vote in off-year elections like this year. And then I think the Obama administration and Democrats are hoping that issues like this will get women more motivated to turn out in November.
Speaking of elections, there's a hot congressional race in the South Bay where incumbent Mike Honda is facing a serious challenge from another Democrat, Ro Khanna. They'll be on the same stage this weekend for probably the only forum they'll have before the June 3rd primary.
That's right. You know, Khanna has really been pushing for a debate with Honda. He thinks he would do well in a face-to-face matchup. This is one of those forums. It's not really a debate, but they will be there together so people can make some comparison. Khanna really portraying himself as a very tech-friendly Democrat. He's got support from a lot of big tech names in the Silicon Valley. He's got a lot of money as well, a 2-to-1 cash advantage over Honda. So it's going to be a really closely watched and probably very expensive race.
There will be some other candidates there as well, but they're probably the 2 biggest names.
By far, absolutely. I mean, there is a Republican in there as well, Vanilla Singh, who may be there, not clear if she's going to show up or not. And of course, the Honda campaign is hoping that she would siphon off votes away from Khanna. With the top 2 primary, we could end up in November having 2 Democrats facing off, Honda versus Khanna, and that would be very interesting.
An interesting race because Honda has served 7 terms, and pundits are saying this may very well be the most expensive congressional race in the country.
Absolutely, and he's going to have his work cut out for him.
Okay, Scott, thank you.
You bet.
And for all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org.
I'm Scott Schaefer. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Thuy Vu. Have a good night.